So can start a presentation about underwater photography in Trinidad and Tobago without something very iconic in the marine world of Tobago specifically. So anybody knows what that is? Without telling me it's a brain coral, but specifically.
Largest boulder brain coral in the world.
Bada bing, bada boom, in the Western Hemisphere.
In the Western Hemisphere.
They got it. It is brilliant. So whoever that is, 5 points already. So it's reputed to be the largest brain coral in the Western Hemisphere. It's in Tobago, obviously. It's bigger than you think. You know, when you think about 5 meters by 3 meters, and you do the math, you're like, oh, that's not that big. But when you're underwater, it's pretty big to see that size of brain coral. And you know, it's known to be there for more than 200 years. So that's one of my favorite shots over my adventures in underwater photography in Tobago. Okay, so I'll kind of dive right in. So quick intro. You know, I am a son of the soil, even though I reside here in Houston. You know, as I go through my journey today, you'll see where my love for photography really is. See all my different logos, you see my background. You know, I did win the Nurture in the Wild competition with a drone shot, strangely enough. And, you know, having a chat with Chad after and saying, you know, I actually do underwater photography, and I would like to introduce that discipline to the photography society. So that's why I'm here today, based on that prodding and of course, Chad and Sarita's invitation. I do some landscape photography also, because we will kind of start off topside, and I know we have a lot of topside photographers here. So there's a bit in this presentation for everybody. But I want to say two things about this shot here. So the first thing I want to talk about is, as a photographer, you guys will know, you never get any pictures. Nobody takes a picture of you, right? That is multiplied by a factor of 1 million when you're underwater. You very rarely get a shot of yourself. So this is a prize shot that a friend of mine took in the Gulf of Mexico. And then the second aspect of the shot for me is, in my professional career, I work in technology for oil and gas, energy, chemicals, and spent a lot of time offshore. And those days, you know, being on a platform or a drilling vessel and, you know, hanging out at night with the guys fishing, and I'm looking down in this big black ocean, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I have no idea what lives there. True. And in fact, it is an artificial reef, and it is unbelievably teeming with life. So very personal shot for me in terms of, you know, where my career has come from, and, you know, taking my underwater photography into that realm. So, okay. All right. So you guys tell me if I'm crazy here. Okay? This is a dive flag. Okay. This is specifically a diver down flag. So marine vessels that have divers on it will fly this flag when divers are in the water to alert other marine vessels in the area that we've got divers in the water. So you see this if you travel to different islands, you know that's a dive shot. But tell me, it's vaguely similar to Trinidad and Tobago flag. I mean, we were meant to be. We were meant to be. You just had a black stripe, and we're Trinidad and Tobago. So, you know, I always laugh because I love my red, white, and black. Everything I have is red, white, and black. Red's my favorite color. Just happened to be close to the scuba diving divers on flag. All right, so I was kind of quick and draw myself. You know, I wanted this to be very interactive today, so I'm gonna actually show you guys some gear and kind of take you through that journey, and we'll come back to the presentation where we'll look at, you know, some underwater shots of Tobago, and I do have 1 or 2 of Trinidad, so I'm not excluding Trinidad. But let me stop here sharing, and let's get into some like Scuba 101, right? So, you know, scuba diving, it's a sport. I you know, as you see in my presentation, I got certified like back in 2015. I'm purely addicted to it, and you know, it is a gear intensive sport. So I think it will only be, you know, it'd be remiss of me if I didn't kind of go through what scuba diving gear looks like. So let's start top down. So mask, not goggles, but a mask. Okay. So this mask covers nose, And it does allow you to breathe out. If you breathe in, it's going to create a vacuum. It's mask going to stick to your face. So first bit of gear you need when you scuba dive. The second bit of gear, it's a little more complicated, but this is a regulator. So this regulator allows you to breathe whatever gas is in your cylinder or tank. So this first stage, as it's called, will connect to that cylinder that you see on people's back, and it will allow you to breathe whatever gas is in it through this second stage. So like that goes in your mouth, and there's an exhaust. And the mechanics of it is when you exhale, the exhaust produces the bubbles, okay? And to be safe and redundant, you've got two of them, right? So one will be brightly illuminated for your dive buddy in case they are low on gas, or if you have a failure on your primary second stage. Then you have a gauge, and this gauge tells you how much gas is in your cylinder, and it's based on PSI or bar, depending where you are in the world. Most cylinders start at 3,500 PSI or 3,000 PSI, depending on the size of the cylinder. And then there's a red zone, which you want to stay out of. That means you're low on that specific gas. So this is an indicator of what's in that cylinder. And then the last cable that's on this overall regulator is an inflator hose. And I'm going to show you where this connects. So just remember, inflator hose. So most of the time you can identify a scuba diver with this quote unquote jacket, this buoyancy compensation device. So you wear it like a jacket, you know, you clip into it. At the back, you actually connect and clip the cylinder on. But if you really think about the word buoyancy and compensation, buoyancy can be either negative, so you're going to sink, or positive, right? You're going to float. What you really want to try achieve is neutral buoyancy, okay? So this helps you achieve neutral buoyancy by allowing that inflator hose to add or remove that gas that's in it into this buoyancy compensator device, this BCD. So when you're at the surface, you fully inflate it and you just sit there and chill and float, wait for the boat to come to you. And then you release all the gas that's in it. And that allows you to be negative. And then, you know, as you kind of examine it some more, there's some areas for your weight pockets. And there's also all sorts of bits and pieces you can attach to that, right? And then, you know, you need fins, not flippers, but you need fins, right? Fins come in different styles. You can have fins like this that require booty, or just red, white, and black, yeah? And then you also have some that are, you know, just a full foot, so you don't actually have to have these booties. These booties are quite convenient because, you know, they're pretty much water shoes. And if you're doing like a short dive and a short entry into some rocks, nice and rugged and kind of protects your foot. So that's kind of the basics of the gear. You know, most of the time people don't get to talk to a scuba diver. You might be walking in Store Bay and you see some guys go in the water and you're like, the first thing that comes to their mind is like, wow, they're going to go deep sea diving. You see this big cylinder on them and you see all these things dangling. Well, hopefully that kind of broke it down for you a little bit there, right? So that's the basics of the scuba diving gear. So let's talk about camera gear, okay?
Wetsuit. So you have to do wetsuit. Well,
they want to bring the wetsuit in, but yes, you have what's called exposure protection. So you can don a wetsuit. A wetsuit is most of the time made of neoprene. You got different thickness. You can have like a 1 mil that you'll use in the Caribbean. You can have a 3 mil you can use for temperate times in the Caribbean, or 5 mil when you go somewhere temperate, right? Most of the time, you know, I'll dive in a skin when I'm in Tobago. Other places I go, I'll wear 3 mil. So yes, definitely, thanks Dave, definitely a wetsuit is needed. And you can even have further exposure protection with gloves. So I use gloves a lot because sometimes I put my hand in the sand to stabilize myself. And the last thing I want to do is put it on some fire coral. So yeah, absolutely, exposure protection is big. All right, again, if any questions you want to put in the chat, you know, at the end of it in Q&A, you know, chat and I can moderate and provide right answers. So underwater camera gear, right? So because I am a, underwater nerd in all forms and fashions, I'm gonna take you a bit of a journey, okay? So this is a Nikonos 1. This was produced in 1963 with partnership with somebody very famous, which I'll give you a hint very soon on. So it is a film camera. There's no light sensor in it. Standard settings, you can actuate your shutter. You could adjust some of your f-stops, shutter speed. But the really interesting part for this audience is the precursor to the Nikonos 1 was called the Calypso, okay? And if you really dig into your nautical nerdiness, Jacques Cousteau, what was the name of his boat? The Calypso. Jacques Cousteau partnered with Nikon to create and develop this Nikonos 1. So from a Calypso, it went to the Nikonos 1, 1963. So bit of history there. But talking about my history with underwater photography, I started very basic, right? I started with a GoPro, okay? I had a Hero 3 Silver in a underwater housing. So it protected the GoPro, right? So just an underwater housing that's rated for about 40 meters. GoPro went in there. There's a nice tight seal on it. And I had it on a selfie stick, and then on I went, right? And then I started developing more and more of it. But no, with like the Hero 9s and 10s and God knows what else is gonna come out in our lives, GoPro started to realize that, in the underwater, in the providing the capability to take the GoPro underwater, there is some scientific limitations with water and light and loss of color. So you'll notice this GoPro that I have here has some color filters on it. So you lose red in the first 10 meters. So I can compensate for that red by putting that filter on. And as I go even deeper, I can compensate for orange by putting the orange filter on. So I just mentioned something that's very, very critical. It's light, okay? And light's a very important aspect of underwater photography that I have learned over my years. So let's talk a bit about light, and then, I'll continue the journey. So, as photographers, as top-size photographers, we compensate light with a flash, right? So you guys have all seen this before, hot shoe flash, got manual settings on it, you've got TTL settings on it, on you go, right? And, some of you may have a diffuser, well, we do the same thing underwater. We have a strobe, okay? And this strobe is not hot shoe, all right? That won't work. So we fire these strobes primarily, for me, optically. So there's a fiber optic cable that goes from here to my camera, and it can either be with a pre-flash, like you see I have on this compact. You see the little flash popped up there. So I do a focus, I do a half press, and the pre-flash comes on, strobe's arm ready to go. I can illuminate the subject. And just like your top side flash, I can adjust the power of that strobe. And I also have a diffuser, so I can manipulate the sharpness of the light it's emitting when I fire the strobe. So the strobes are an essential part to create and compose underwater. But you don't actually have to start there, because as you start diving, and if you decide to do a night dive or whatever, you're going to end up with some sort of dive torch, okay? And this dive torch can also act as a compensation for light. And, you can come and do different colors. You can get creative with it. And that's where I really started. So what I really started with was a torch and a GoPro. So I compensated for color and that loss of color as I got deeper by using a light. I was able to capture stills and videos with the GoPro. And then, as my limitations exposed themselves, no pun intended, I realized, okay, Justin, so what's the next step? Because like all of us in our photographic journeys, we hit a wall with the gear and our desire to compose and create. So my next step was pretty simple, right? And it was kind of back to front. So enter the era of underwater housings. So this is my actual first true underwater housing. It was made by a company called Sea Frogs. And I went online and I tried to find the cheapest housing for the best compact camera I could find. And the combination I got was a Sony RX100 20 megapixel Mark II, great video, 1080p, 24 frames per second. It had a flash, so I can do pre-flash. And I found the actual housing for it on, I can't remember, eBay, Amazon, whatever. Can't remember how much I paid for it, but it was very affordable. It allowed me to add a wide angle lens to it. And the key element of a underwater housing is the ability to take this camera that you're familiar with the functions topside, put it into the housing, seal it once you make sure you clean your O-rings and whatever. And these piano keys here allow you to manipulate the camera as you would topside. So I can turn it on it comes, right? I can, focus, and I can take a shot, just as I would topside with this. So this was brilliant. It was a brilliant find for me, and I was like, oh my God, I'm an underwater photographer. I am amazing. So I shot this for probably 2 years, and then I coupled it with a light, and I realized, whoa, this is spectacular. I am ready for National Geographic. And then I coupled it even further with a strobe, this exact same housing. And like everything else, my composition started to get better because I was able to light subjects more effectively. But I hit a wall with this. The wall I hit with this was focus, right? Because topside, you have gravity working on your side, so you're steady unless you have a tripod. You can manipulate light by walking around and moving your subjects around. Underwater, you're at the mercy of everything else. So shutter speed and autofocus was really, really big for me. And from this housing, I jumped to that one on the wall there, which gave me some additional controls. But again, I struggled with getting the shots that I wanted. So into the era of digital SLRs, which will give us the ability to do multiple frames per second. And more important, you can get a really large sensor on them. And I decided in 2020, I was going to play the lotto, get a susuhan, sell a liver, do whatever it takes to afford to get into this realm. So I invested in the Nikon D850, full frame bad boy, 45 megapixels or whatever it is. And the housing that's designed specifically for that body. So this is the Nordicam housing for it. Same thing, piano controls everywhere. My viewfinder goes here. So I literally look through a viewfinder. So I went from looking at a screen to compose to more of a traditional style, single eye comfort level of like, I could compose this with one eye, right? Because that's what we do, right? It's pretty much what we do. Couple things to note that are really important about these housings and these bodies. As you know, topside, you have interchangeable lenses. You don't have that built-in, mechanical optics as a compact has. And you can either, underwater, I either shoot wide angle or I shoot macro. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, right? So, for me, I will set my camera up as it is right now for wide angle with my 50 millimeter. And then if I want to go shoot macro, I have a macro port that I'll remove this glass dome, put the macro port on. This one is designed for the Nikon 105, which gives me about, foot focal range, or I'll shoot with a 6-day sometimes, right? But this was a huge learning curve for me. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you, there are some days that I miss my compact, because underwater is either you get the subject or you don't, because it's gone, right? And you know, understanding the complications of the digital SLR world underwater, that was just a huge learning curve for me. I think I'm not there yet. I'm still kind of learning as I go along, but this is where I am today. So, you know, as I go through the presentation today, I'm going to show you different shots. I think primarily they are wide angle because Tobago is that majestic. I love macro hunting. I'm a macro photographer. I love the treasure hunt of looking through little cracks and seeing something move, and you know, getting it on a 60mm full frame, and pinching and zooming and seeing all the little hairs on this little crab or whatever. But this pretty much kind of sums up my journey. You know, as I said, I still use my GoPro. My GoPros are not retired, and I'll tell you why. Because if I set my housing up on my camera for macro and a whale shark swims by, what do you think I'm going to shoot? I'm going to get a white dot if I even get that close. And if I that close to a whale shark, I got bigger problems. So I have my GoPro with me at all times doing B-roll, right? If I'm shooting macro, even when I'm shooting wide angle, I still have my GoPro. This is it here. Maybe I'll
we have a couple questions there just before you jump back into the presentation. So I could call them on face here after the thing.
Sure.
Karen was asking about your promise to explain the inflator hose and the dump valve. So you could maybe
yes. So the inflator hose basically takes gas from your cylinder and injects it into your buoyancy compensation device, so you don't have to do it yourself. So there's a button on the BCD. There's a red one, there's a gray one. You hit it, it inflates, right? The dump allows you to remove that gas from it that's under pressure in those bladders, because the BCD is made up of air bladders pretty much, right? So inflator hose adds the air in, dump removes the air.
Right, I had two questions. The housings, how how reliable are they? I mean, you're taking up, couple $1,000 cameras.
Very good question.
I don't know. Have you ever had any leaks or, I mean, those kind of things
no.
that people
I can
worry about?
show you something. I can show you something on the housing right now. At this level of housings, they come with leak detection. So you probably see that blue light. Can you see that blue light that's on the housing? So I can vacuum seal this housing, right? Once everything is set up, I can pull all the air out, and that blue light will go from blue to amber to green. And most of the time, I have that green the night before. So at any moment in time, there is a leak based on, I didn't clean my O-rings right. I didn't seat some right. I wake up next morning and that's red, problem. If I am in the water, I am going to get either an audible alarm that tells me there is moisture in the housing, and I'm going to get a visual alarm that goes from green to amber to red. On the cheaper side of the housings, which they're actually getting vacuum sealed the same way. This one didn't have that. So I just made sure every single time I inserted the camera that O-ring was properly clean, and cross my fingers, right? And this price point of housings, they also come with leak detection. And then the GoPros, these are rated for the same thing, 130 feet. They don't have leak detection, but the GoPros themselves have, the newer models, they have water resistance up to, I think now, 10 meters without a housing. So, I think it's pretty reliable. It comes down to meticulous care, like everything else, right? You've got to take care of your systems, and I like to prepare them as best as I could the night before, so I don't have to think about it when I wake up next morning. If I'm doing multiple dives and I change lenses in between dives, there's always a risk factor there. So I make sure I'm in a nice dry area, my hands are dry. I check the O-rings, make sure there's no hair or particles or sand. I vacuum seal it, and I give it at least an hour or 20, 30 minutes before I get any water.
Sarita wanted to find out about the filters that you showed on the GoPro. Would you end up stacking those color filters, or is it because as you go down, you lose different frequencies, different colors of the light, right?
Yes.
So how does that work?
So again, I want to say at 10 meters, you lose red, right? And you can compensate red by adding a red filter. That's if you don't have additional light. If you didn't have a torch, if you didn't have a strobe, you can add that back. So you will get that beautiful blue. If not, it's going to look green. Things are just going to look green on your video. You see some GoPro videos on YouTube and they all look green, right? So that one adds that. And then the orange, I have used on Rex. So I can actually get a really great video that shows the beautiful blue ocean, that that aging of that, of that wreck, that, the flora on the wreck, that, it looks brown to you, but as I add that orange, all of a sudden I get different tones in that, in the coral that's grown over that artificial reef. So this just bolts onto the GoPro. They're pretty cheap. You can buy them at $10 on Amazon. Most people start with the red. As you get deeper, you probably need the orange. I think back in the days, some of the actual cameras, there was a red filter that actually went onto the front of the port, right? Before people actually had light. So I've seen in some of my vintage camera collections that, there are some red and orange filters that you can screw on to the front of it back in the days.
All right, cool.
Awesome. All right, any other questions? Okay, let's go back to it. So I hope you guys, learned something on the scuba diving gear kind of one-on-one, and then, some of my underwater photography gear and kind of my journey. You see some of my relics from, the 60s on it. So let's talk about Tobago, because I'm, unfortunately I have a lot of, most of my photography is centered around Tobago. I do have 2 shots of Trinidad, so don't worry. This is just to highlight the amazing amount of reefs and dive sites that you can, visit in Tobago right next to you, right? I haven't even done 20% of these, right? So I'm still behind on taking half of these off. Dave, who's local to Tobago and an underwater photographer there, probably has done most of them. But, the MV Maverick wreck on the southwest side, great wreck. Anything on the south coast near the airport, Flying Fish, Flying Reef is also good. I don't see Divers Thirst, which is even further south. That's a really spectacular dive. Japanese Gardens is pretty famous. People travel all over the world to come to the Japanese Gardens. And then of course, Little Tobago, most of those accessible from space side. So what I want to also do is kind of highlight, well, how do I actually do this? So I've kind of given you the gear, kind of show you the site. So you got to have a dive shop. And forgive me if there's a dive shop that's connected to that I haven't connected with. Hit me an email. I will find you the next time I come to Tobago or Trinidad. But I'm going to give you the dive shops that I use based on proximity to the airport. The easiest way to do it, okay? So the first one is Frontier Dive Shop right on Store Bay. I've been diving with these guys day 1, 2015. They've, can get you in contact with any one of these dive shops the same way. One of the things that I love about diving in Tobago is that you can take your family, not necessarily to go dive if you're just diving alone or snorkeling or whatever, but your family can go to Store Bay, grab some lunch, bathe. Most of the dive sites are 8-10 minutes away, right? Maximum 20 minutes if you're going to like Divers Thirst or Divers Dream, which is further south. But Frontier is right there in Store Bay. And then go see Derek at Undersea Tobago. He's at the Cocoa Reef Resort, which you can see in the photo on the left. If you're staying at the Cocoa Reef, it is unbelievably convenient. Literally down the steps to the beach to the right-hand side there. If you're interested in technical diving, Derek would love to talk to you. I had a great chat with him about technical diving in Tobago and seeing what we can go explore there. And then Go see Sean in Speyside. You know, I've had great times there with Sean. He cracks me up every time. He'll drone shot of Sean's renovations there at Tobago Dive Experience. A bit of a bed and breakfast too. You definitely can stay there. That truck that you see perpendicular to the road is the dive shop. So you get at the back of the truck, you pass Gemma's Treehouse, get onto the pier. You're literally in the water from the shop to the dive site under 15 minutes, unless they're packing the boat. So unbelievably easy diving, guys, right? You're not talking about getting seasick for 30-minute rides out there, or even sometimes 1 hour boat rides one way, right? All the dive sites, as you can see, are hugging the coastline. So these are dive shops I use. If there's a shop online, hit me up. I'll come find you next time I'm in Trinidad or Tobago. Okay, so as it'd be remiss of me again to not take you truly on the journey. So what did I do? I got certified, all right? So you can do Discover Scuba, which any one of those shops can do for you. You can go there without any certification. You don't have to be an amazing, strong swimmer or anything like that. And they will take you through a 1-hour course with some practical, take you in the water, you do your first dive, you're hooked, then you go through the certification process, right? So I got PADI Open Water certified back in 2015. I didn't own any gear. All the gear that I just showed you, I owned none of it. All I owned was a GoPro and a selfie stick. That's it. Prepared, ready to go. There are different ways you can enter the water based on the type of marine vessels. The ones that I showed you in Tobago, they're kind of like 6-pack boats. So it's very cool. You kind of back roll off of them if you like that kind of action. I like it a lot. Primarily, if it's a bigger vessel, you'll giant stride. So that's my first giant stride onto the Antilla wreck in Aruba. Okay, so the Antilla wreck was scuttled when Germany invaded the Dutch in World War II, as you could figure out why. It is a massive wreck. It's about 150 meters by about 30 meters, and it's kind of broken in two. You can see where the captain flooded the boiler room and it exploded. Amazing wreck, very shallow. So, of course, being a millennial, my first underwater photo was a selfie, right? You have to have a selfie. So, shot with my GoPro Hero 3 back in those days. I was unbelievably hooked at that point. I thought, this is wild. I'm gonna do this for the rest of my life, right? I was absolutely addicted at this point. So I came back to Houston. I went to my local dive shop, Giggling Marlin, and I said, what's next? And they said, okay, go do advanced open water. Did it. Different construct in terms of what you will learn from your open water to your advanced in terms of, navigation, not search and rescue, navigation, you do a deep dive. There's some specialties you can do. Check it out on PADI's website or SSI, whichever you prefer. And then my addiction drove me to days like this. I just wish I was diving all the time. I just literally would just sit around and be like, please, when next can I get in the water? And of course, the gay addiction started, right? So all right, many certifications later, I'm kind of going on a technical diving path now where I can do depths and do dives that are past recreational limits using multiple cylinders and multiple gases and different types of blends. So on that path, but still had days like this. Still had days where I was just like, oh my God, I want to get in the water. I promise you, you will become addicted. And the gay addiction is real, okay? So not taken away from the scuba diving, really and truly, I'll credit my dad for my underwater photography journey, right? So, that's my dad there, those awesome shots, and I've got those awesome yellow floaties on. And I thought that's what I told him that day. And of course, being a great husband, he's like, ask your mom first. Who coincidentally took the shot, by the way, because it wasn't my dad, right? So bring it back home. I started off with birds. You heard David Lenderman talking about birds. A lot of underwater photographers are birders, to be honest. So if you guys recognize this balcony, hopefully it will come back in the next year or so. This is Ace Right. So I'm from Arima, and I would go to Ace Right as often as I could, and I'll go shoot birds. And talking to other photographers on the balcony there, I understood more the trifecta of ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. Did I really listen? No, I still kept it on auto because it was just too hard for me, right? You'll see how that actually, kind of stifled me a little bit underwater. All right, so my gear addiction for underwater camera and photography gear started, right? You can see I still have this housing. So this housing is more than 7 years old. I still have the GoPro. I still have that light, and I think I sold the camera and the strobe. So a lot of the gear you have, it'll last you a very long time once you treat it right, wash it once it comes out of the salt water. But it'll all come down to your desire to compose and to shoot different things in different scenarios. So it's kind of where I'm at right now. Yeah, I know it's a lot. I think that's a bit dated, but it is highly addictive, right? I think one thing all photographers, regardless of what you do and shoot, we're all very much OCD when it comes to our gear. Because I'm pretty certain any one of us as a photographer send someone to our bag, you can tell them exactly where to find what you're looking for, right? So yes, it is definitely addictive for me. All right, so I think this you'll see as we do some image review that I realize how much I love the sport of scuba diving, how much I love photography even before I got underwater, and how hard sometimes it could be. It can be very frustrating, but you just gotta keep shooting, right? That's kind of what it came down to for me, right? And if I had 400 shutter actuations on one dive, I pretty much have 10 good shots, and in those 10, I probably have 4, right? It doesn't change, right, on top side, because it's the same thing. You can have 200 shutter actuations on a photo shoot top side, and you're probably going to keep 15, 20, 30, even so much, right? And then you start dumbing it down. So you just got to keep shooting, okay? So for the gay nerds, it's going to flash this. I'm not going to spend too much time here. We maybe having a follow-up session where I kind of do a deep dive into the gear, but we are photographers. We want to know what's what, right? So again, I talked about the Nikon D850 full frame. I've got 2 macro lenses. The 105 gives me a longer focal length. I think it's about 1 foot and a little bit. So I use that for skittish creatures. If something doesn't let me get too close, then I can stand back on it. And then the 60, of course, I can have, I would say about 6 to 7 inches sometimes of focal distance. And I can fold the frame with that subject because I can get closer, right? The 2 things I want to highlight here, and again, maybe a topic for another day. This silver cylindrical thing you see is called a light shaping device. It's called a snoot. And you guys may know what snoot photography is, but underwater it is spectacular. I love snoot photography, okay? And all it does, it just allows you to shape the light from that strobe exactly where you want it based on aperture cards. So you have big aperture cards and small aperture cards. You have oval cards. You have square cards. You can get unbelievably creative. So that was my first snoot, and that was a bit bulky, so I'm shooting the smaller one now. So maybe another day I'll show you like some snoot photography. Just like if you're doing macro topside, you can use diopters so that you can magnify your subject. We do the same thing underwater. So we have this super macro converter. So it's pretty much a diopter. I put it on. It has the most unbelievable focal distance. Like you literally have to rock back and forth to find the thing, right? It's super hard, and I love it. When you get the shot of something the size of a rice grain and you see it literally fold the entire frame and you see the detail on it, it's spectacular. I love it. And then wide angle, as I said before, I can either shoot macro or I can shoot wide angle, right? So, 15, pretty much my standard, my only wide angle lens. Some people could, you can do, I've even seen some people doing up to like a 10 underwater, or maybe a 24 to 70, depending on your camera and the housing. But I shoot 15. at f2.8. You see, I have my strobes, as I mentioned before, but I also have a slave strobe. So I want you to just keep that slave strobe in mind, because you're going to be like, what is he going to do with that slave strobe? And then you also notice the tripod, okay? So I'm giving you some clues of what's coming up next, because we're all photographers, and if you like night photography, you really, really like night photography, I have something interesting to show you. Okay, so bringing it back home, you guys are privileged to see my first underwater photo ever in Tobago. You see the serial number. This is it. You guys ready for this? Okay, wait for it. Bam. Bam. National Geographic quality. I know. I didn't post it because I couldn't handle all the likes, but that's my first photograph underwater. Well, I was trying to get the stingray. There was a lot going on here that day, but yeah, that's serial one. So you guys can say I saw Justin's first ever underwater photo in Tobago. All right, so what did I inspire me to do, right? Just keep shooting, right? So I kept shooting. So kind of started to understand composition. I jumped to the Sony at that point because, the GoPro has a bit of a shutter lag. That Hero 3 especially, you hit the shutter, beep, 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 beep. Subject's gone. I was shooting in JPEG, and I was pretty much still on auto. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I was 100% an auto guy. Okay, so this is 2018, and then I thought, all right, I'm just gonna keep going. I'm gonna just keep diving. I'm gonna keep shooting. Same Sony, still shooting JPEG, but then I discovered the world of manual, and then I had strobes, and I thought, okay, all right, this is actually getting better. I like this. Okay, so fast forward, I learned composition. I figured out RAW. I figured out Lightroom. And I just kept shooting manual, and I only shoot manual today, right? Just didn't stop. I looked at other underwater photographers, looked at their compositions, looked at their shooting techniques, bought different books, YouTube the hell out of all this stuff. And one of the key things about underwater photography is being able to describe perspective and size, okay? So you add a diver into your shot. So you can see the shot on the right is a massive sponge. I would take about 4 bears to tell you guys how big the sponge was with this story, right? But all I needed to do was put a diver in it, and you kind of figured out it's a really big sponge, Justin, right? Again, just kept shooting. So this is all space side. It's everything here you see here is Tobago. See a little brood of fish on the side there too. That's not sand. It's a little baby fish there, a little school of them. Shot on the left, I think it's the wreck outside, blue water. And then I got my revenge on the Maverick, because that very first serial number shot you saw 0000001 was on the Maverick wreck, and I shot that recently. So and then of course they're always humans, right? So in a recent trip to Tobago, these boys were having a Yahoo jumping off the pier, and I thought, I'm gonna go get the camera. So I'm pretty certain this is all over their Instagrams right now, but especially the guy with all the abs, I'm pretty certain he's posted that. But anyway, this is a bit of a different technique. This is more like a split shot, as you see. So I was able to keep the dome as dry as possible. Set my aperture was probably f18, so I can get as much in focus. High shutter speed, great lighting, lights up my back, golden hour. I was able to kind of capture these summertime shots. I did say I had some photos of Trinidad, not as spectacular as Tobago, I know, but I had one quite amazing adventure for a different day and a few bears, diving off of Monos, one of the islands, northwestern Trinidad. That's pretty much what I got with the Sony and that. So that's pretty much my claim to fame for Trinidad shots. But yeah, I mean, essentially for me, it's all about creativity, right? So remember I told you, what was Justin doing with that slave strobe? And 2, what was he doing with a tripod underwater? long exposures. You can do underwater long exposures. So this is a night dive in Bonaire, and I was able to convince my dive buddy to go diving with 6-foot tarpons at night, and we were going to go do this awesome creative shot. So what I did was I put the strobes, my slave strobes, below the boat. So what you see in here, I know it looks kind of bizarre, but what you see in front of you is the bow of the boat, but the boat's inverted. So it's sank, inverted. So that's the bow of the boat there. And I was able to put the strobes at the front of the boat to illuminate it, and then fire my main strobe and slave to get a reaction from those two slaves. But the key thing is, as you know, when you do a long exposure, so let me show you the settings here, right? So this is 15 seconds, f14, ISO 200 on my wide angle. So what I was able to do here was stabilize the camera so I can have that long exposure, so the tripod. And I was also able to, again, capture the diver, which you can't see, but is holding a torch with a red light and is swimming towards me. And that's what you see on the right. So you can get very creative underwater with exactly the gear you have, you know, of course, the addition of the tripod. This one here was recent. So this was shot, I think, in Kona, Hawaii. And this was with my underwater housing and the tripod, but this was not a submerged, long exposure, but this was more of a topside long exposure, so I can kind of get that silkiness of the waves crashing into me. And, you know, my daughter and I kind of watching the sunset, and we just like, oh my God, this looks like, you know, the mountains above the clouds with a volcano about to erupt. So very fitting for Hawaii. All right, so I'm going to speed through there because I'm kind of conscious of time. This happens when you get into this sport. You get gear intensive, you will be that person at the airport. I promise you, it doesn't have to be this way, right? I'm going to show you. There's a different way, right? Okay, so all that said, here is my absolute takeaway and recommendation for underwater photography. Get a GoPro all day. You know, I've seen some footage on a GoPro Hero 10. I've seen some footage on the 6, 7. It doesn't matter what you have. Get a GoPro. It works brilliantly. No drama. Okay.
And
you
the 11 was released yesterday.
And the 11 is, there you go. Exactly. Yeah. This to me is very innovative, and I think this is the future. So I was on a trip recently, and a guy had one of these with an iPhone, I don't know, 13, whatever, Pro, blah, blah, blah. And he got some unbelievably amazing shots from his camera phone with a housing designed for it. So go check out Sea Life's Sport Diver smartphone housings. They are not expensive at all. They come with an app, so you don't have to fiddle with the touchscreen interface, obviously underwater. It comes with the piano keys I described. Check this out. And as I mentioned before, you know, the Sea Frogs housing, I think that's where I started. The best price point to get in. Tons of housings based on whatever existing topside cameras you have. That's what I would do. Okay. So, you know, I think the sky's the limit for, you know, especially for me in underwater photography. I literally think about this stuff every day, trying to think about what my next expedition is, what I want to shoot, how I'm going to shoot it. You know, I started some astrophotography recently. I hope to do it in Trinidad. You guys can follow my adventures, you know, on my socials, drop me an email. I know Chad may send some contact information after. Feel free to reach out if you want to talk about, you know, any bit of the presentation today or scuba diving, or if you even want to get in contact with some of the dive shops there, right? But last but not least, thank you, Chad and Sarita. You know, as I say, I was very privileged to win that competition with a drone shot, but deep down inside, I'm an underwater photographer. So thanks for letting me kind of get onto your schedule and help promote this this new discipline that I think it's amazing that we have all of these spectacular, pristine dive sites right there in Trinidad and Tobago. Let's capture it and share it with the top side. Okay, that's what I got.
Justin, Chris wants to know if we could start off with a mask, fins, and snorkel.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, Chris.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks a lot, Justin. I mean, that was awesome. Who has any questions? I'm sure y'all have some questions for Justin. I mean, don't be shy. Justin is here. He came to spread the word. Anyone have any questions for Justin?
Natalie asked him which dive stood out to him the most and why.
In Tobago, so I would say space, anything in space side will stand out the most. So the Caribbean coast is amazing, it's spectacular. But for the first time ever, I got vertigo underwater in space side because some of the dive sites, they're underwater canyons that are twice the body of water that you're in. So let's say I'm at 60 feet, I can see another 150 feet below me, but I can see topography. Like I'm floating above a mountain. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I would say anything in space side.
Yeah, I'd like to add, hi folks, good night. My name is Dave Elliott. I'm the underwater photographer in Tobago. I think like Justin said, space side is a planet by itself. Everything you would dive and see on the western side of the island, the coral is fatter, the water is cooler. I mean, a turtle took me away in space side and I was lost for a bit because of the beauty in space side. You see so much things. In space side alone has so much. Like I often say space side is between two world's greatest.
Unbelievable.
It's the largest breeding coral in the Western Hemisphere is in the waters. The oldest forest reserve in the Western Hemisphere is right above it. Pigeon Peak is right there. And it all culminates in the middle, space side. I think space side alone has that area alone has two wrecks. It has a wide number of reefs. The color is beautiful. I mean, when you go down there, then is when I realized why they call this place Blue Waters Inn, because the water is really blue.
It's blue.
It's blue, you know? So it's space side is indeed amazing. I mean, the waters in Tobago are amazing. I mean, I also do some work with the IMA, the Institute of Marine Affairs, and they do all the surveys in space side. I mean, it's just amazing.
Do it. And you know, I think just to kind of echo what Dave is saying, the commute to the dive site is 10 minutes max. 10 minutes from the dock to the dive site, literally. And when you're done, you're 10 minutes to a Caribou or Stag or whatever you're into. Like, it's literally 10 minutes, which is epic to me. I love it.
Nothing more than that.
Yeah. Any other questions? I mean, you know, as I say, we'll probably work on a follow-up where we do more of a deep dive. I'll kind of put the camera system together, kind of show you guys the bits and pieces. All the stuff I wish I knew, you know, that, you know, YouTube didn't teach me. I could kind of bring that to you. I think that, you know, as I said, the GoPro is probably the entry point I would go at right now, or, you know, one of these Sea Frog housings for your top side camera. You don't actually have to be a scuba diver to actually take underwater photography, right? You can snorkel, you can free dive, or you can wade around in the water, right? You can still get creative, right? So don't let that also be a distraction for being able to capture what's in the ocean, right? So
Awesome. We just did a little poll here, so we actually have just to figure out the
7 o'clock.
We have about 70% divers in the audience, so we had quite a few number of divers in the audience, so that's cool.
Awesome. All right, Sarita, you need to be that 1%.
Yeah, I am the 1%. I don't dive, but I'll learn.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It might be the last time I speak to you because I might drown.
I've tried to do mine, but I had to ask because I'm in New York. I don't want to do the tests in the cold water. So it's a matter of it's a matter of timing between when I do the pool stuff versus when I have to do the dives. So I have to time it so that I'd be in Trinidad when it's time to do the certification part.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
no,
Yeah, nothing like a destination certification. I promise you.
Yeah, because the
I
water
did
is
that.
cold.
I did that. I was not doing the lakes of Texas. I'm sorry. I needed blue water.
Yeah, I agree.
Very
yeah,
good.
definitely that's the way to go, Giselle.
Doug actually asked if you would try free diving to do underwater photography.
Yeah, so good question. I just haven't had the time to do the free diving course, you know. I think it's the actually other way around. The subjects I want to shoot, I want them to be free divers, right? So you see a lot of great underwater photography now where you have lifelike topside models on artificial reefs, you know, artificial wrecks or on a reef with no scuba gear on. Nothing I showed you, right? They are free divers. What you don't see behind those ladies' dresses are weights. They have weights around them so they can achieve negative buoyancy. And there's also a safety diver, like what Dave is sometimes for some of the things he does. That will bring gas for them. So I actually want to shoot free divers rather than be a free diver myself.
Oh, we have in the chat here that Alexander is currently doing his party, so he's getting certified.
Awesome.
So we have some photos to look forward to, Alexander.
There you go. There you go. And YouTube is your friend. Not everything in YouTube, but don't forget, YouTube is your friend. Don't listen to everything out there.
Can I ask something?
Oh, man.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if I'm being heard.
Yes, we're hearing you loud and clear, Chris.
Okay. What would be like the standard settings for, you know, your speed and your aperture and your ISO?
Oh, great question. So if I'm in space side and I get in the water between 10 and 11, I got the sun right above me, okay? So I've got a lot of light. So I can bump my ISO all the way down. I can do ISO 100 and still get some light coming in. If I'm shooting some sort of marine life, like a fish or a turtle, that thing's moving. So I would be minimum 1/25th of a second, like minimum, right? Depending on how far you are from the subject, and one of the rules of underwater photography is if you think you're close, get closer, right? So I would normally, like my jump settings that day would be like F8, 1/25th of a second. If I'm in the afternoon and that sun's gone and I'm using my strobes to compensate, my strobes sync maximum at a 2/50th of a second. So I could push that shutter speed all the way there, still be at F8, F11 on a wide angle. And if it's dark, I'll probably bump it up to like ISO 300, 320. If I'm shooting macro and I'm right in front of the subject and I know for sure I'm going to illuminate the body of water between my port and that subject, I'm at 1/250th of a second and I am at F22. My camera will do F32. So I'm trying to get as much in focus as possible at ISO 100 because I'm for sure going to light you up.
Justin, just to clarify, you said 1/25th of a second earlier. Did you mean 1/250th?
1/250th, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds doable.
Yeah. So I mean, even on my compact, my jump settings, which I can't change lenses, my jump settings were ISO 200, 1/125th of a second, and I think like a F10, somewhere around there. So, reasonable enough.
Yeah. Thanks.
Welcome.
Great. Well, let's Justin, thanks a million for this intro to underwater photography. I think it was quite illuminating. I've dived and stuff already, but I've never really tried out this thing. But I mean, you make it sound so easy. You just get a GoPro and get going. So definitely I'll have to take up that challenge.
Well, we know Chris going to jump in the water shortly and start to shoot.
Chris already
sound like
looking
he
for
ready.
a snorkel and a mask. So
for it.
Yeah, Justin, thanks a lot. So everyone who's here, we're trying to get Justin, hopefully when he comes next time for a visit, to maybe do an in-person we'll get together. So
Yeah.
keep your eyes and ears out for that, and keep looking at our social and on the mailing list. Not related to underwater photography, we actually have we have a architectural photography workshop in person in the plans. So again, keep an eye out for that. That will be be thinking as a one-day workshop. We're still working on some of the details. So if you're interested in that, keep your eye on our pages and our website. Thank you so much for coming out and spending your Thursday evening with us. Thank you, Justin, for sharing so openly and volunteering and being so happy to pull this together. I know you're a busy guy. I'm trying to get in touch with you sometimes, but thanks a million. So thank you, everyone. Have a great night. Let me quickly just share our contact information for everybody who just might not have seen Justin's stuff. Yep, so that's Justin's stuff there. All right, and this is Trinidad Photographic Society. So, all right, so I'll bid everyone a good night, and yeah, keep shooting.
Yes.
And we'll see you around. All right.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Bye. Okay.
Bye.
Thanks, Justin.
Welcome.